Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and that's actually okay, because I think it's great that all members of Parliament from all parties in this House have an opportunity to participate in this important debate tonight, and everyone will get their chance. And I think that's a great thing about Canada's Parliament and about our democracy, is that we encourage and we want to hear from all people. So tonight, Mr. Speaker, I'm here to talk, obviously, about the situation in Syria. And, you know, from the outset, Canada has actively supported multilateral efforts to address the conflict in Syria. This includes supporting ongoing political and security initiatives while playing a leading role in meeting humanitarian needs. The Government of Canada will continue to closely collaborate with multilateral partners in an effort to find a solution to end the violence in Syria in order to allow for a transition to a stable, democratic, and pluralistic Syria. The violence in Syria continues to take a terrible toll on the civilian population. All Canadians are horrified by the ongoing violence in Syria, including the indiscriminate attacks on that civilian population. Despite the international outcry and numerous condemnations by the international community to end the violence, the conflict in Syria is worsening. Since the violence began, more than 80,000 Syrians, most of them civilians, have lost their lives. Over 4.25 million Syrians have been displaced from their homes and communities. And more than 6.8 million are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance. The influx of refugees fleeing Syria underscores the appalling impact of this conflict. Canada has soundly condemned the Assad regime's vicious and indiscriminate attacks on its civilian people. We continue to call upon the government of Syria to immediately cease the use of heavy weapons in population centers. Mr. Speaker, conscious of the danger, thousands of Syrians have chosen to flee their country and seek refuge outside its borders. Over 1.4 million individuals have fled the neighboring countries. Turkey is hosting over 324,000 refugees. Lebanon is hosting over 455,000. Jordan is hosting over 448,000, and Iraq is hosting over 142,000. And Egypt, more than 62,000. We want to commend the governments of these countries for their great generosity in welcoming those who are seeking safety. We recognize the burden that this places on them. But Canada stands with the Syrian people in their time of need. Canada, through CEDA, has provided humanitarian assistance to allow humanitarian organizations to provide urgent life-saving relief inside Syria and to those who have sought relief in neighboring countries. This support is allowing humanitarian organizations to provide emergency food assistance, shelter, safe water, sanitation facilities, essential household items, emergency health care, and often much-needed assistance to Syrians who are affected by this crisis. We will continue to work closely with our like-minded partners to address those humanitarian needs, both inside Syria and in those neighboring countries. For many of those remaining in Syria, unfortunately, the outlook is grim. Humanitarian organizations, and most notably, the Syrian Arab Red Crescent and the International Committee of the Red Cross, as well as the United Nations agencies, are making every effort to meet the urgent life-saving needs of those affected by the violence. However, these efforts continue to be obstructed. UN humanitarian relief efforts continue to be hampered by extreme insecurity and restrictions imposed by the Assad regime. Sadly, even humanitarian actors are not immune from the violence and have paid with their lives in their efforts to provide relief to others. Canada continues to call for a full, safe, and unhindered humanitarian access to those who are in need. Those in positions of power in Syria must move quickly to facilitate those efforts. The Government of Canada, in cooperation with other international partners, will continue to press at every opportunity on this point. So, Mr. Speaker, Canada is deeply concerned by the threats to the safety and security faced by humanitarian workers in Syria. Already, the Secretary General of the Syrian Arab Red Crescent and 5 Red Crescent volunteers have lost their lives in the line of duty. We pay tribute, Mr. Speaker, to their immense courage. Medical personnel, medical facilities, and ambulances must not be targeted, and healthcare personnel must be able to provide aid in safety without hindrance. The Red Cross and Red Crescent emblems, for example, must be respected by all sides. Canada continues to support the efforts of the international community to bring about an end to the violence. Canada has financially supported the mission of the UN Joint Special Representative. We have repeatedly called on all parties to cooperate with and support the efforts of the Joint Special Envoy, Lakhdar Brahimi, to end the bloodshed and facilitate an inclusive Syrian-led political transition. We urge the UN Security Council to adopt binding international sanctions against the Assad regime in order to increase pressure on Assad to immediately stop the violence and to end what is now becoming a humanitarian catastrophe. We continue to call on those countries with influence in Damascus to press the Assad regime to end the violence and work towards a peaceful political transition. Canada has enacted 11 rounds of strict economic sanctions against the Assad regime and has expelled all remaining Syrian diplomats. We call on countries around the world to adopt equally strong measures against the Syrian regime to ensure that it fulfills its commitments and immediately stops the senseless slaughter of its own people. Canada has participated in all of the Friends of Syria working groups and co-chaired a meeting of the International Working Group on Sanctions known as the Friends of the Syrian People. We will continue to exert pressure on the Syrian regime in order to further isolate Assad. Mr. Speaker, the Government of Canada will continue to support multilateral efforts to end the needless suffering of Syrians affected by this crisis. And we will work to ensure life-saving assistance reaches those who need it. Mr. Speaker, finally, the violence in Syria must end. A political solution to the crisis must be found. The international community must redouble its efforts to pressure the Syrian regime to stop the violence against its own citizens. And Assad must step down in order to allow a democratic and pluralistic Syria to emerge. May God bless all of the people of Syria in this time of need. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? L'honorable député de La Pointe-de-L'Île.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et écoutez, merci beaucoup à mon collègue de son discours. Mais la simple question que j'aimerais lui demander, c'est celle-ci. Alors pourquoi, si son gouvernement a voté pour une motion qui demandait à cette Chambre, au ministre de l'Immigration, d'adopter un mécanisme de facilitation pour la réunification des familles, rien n'a encore été fait? Si mon collègue reconnaît la crise en Syrie, l'urgence de la situation, pourquoi est-ce que son gouvernement n'a encore rien fait pour aider les réfugiés syriens?
The honourable member for Mississauga-Streetsville.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's no country in this world that is more open to refugees and to helping those around the world and resettling them, not just in Canada, but around the world, than the country of Canada. So we have no lessons to take from any other regime or any other individual in this House on that regard. Canada's reputation is stellar. But our job is to work with the United Nations Human Rights Commission and the Refugee Resettlement Program to make sure that we're working with them to ensure that Canada's role is in partnership with the international community. I believe that's exactly what the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration has said we are doing, and that is exactly what Canada will continue to do. Our job is to partner with the international community to get the best results for those Syrians and those Syrian refugees who are outside of their country right now, to make sure they can return home to the country they want to return to and the country that they love.
Correct. Questions and comments? The honourable member for Toronto Centre.
Speaker, I congratulate the member for his comments and his speech. But I'm wondering, though, I detect a certain tension in the position of the government. The government's position would appear to be Assad must go, on the one hand, but on the other hand, but we don't want anything, but we're not sure what's going to replace him, so we're not sure how and when he should go. I wonder if the member could perhaps clarify exactly what is the position of the government with respect to the position of President Assad.
The honourable member for Mississauga-Streetsville.
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to thank the honourable member for Toronto Centre for starting this conversation tonight. I know it was his motion to bring us here tonight. I think this is a very important role that we all play as members of Parliament, to have these conversations and to make sure that we are speaking out on issues both domestically and internationally. And I'm pleased to have the opportunity to participate in this debate. I think we know that the situation in Syria is complicated. And it's not just about regime change of the current leadership we have, but also making sure that regime change, when it does happen, also benefits the people of Syria, that it's in the best interest of them, that it's not just some rogue group that takes over. So I think our job as the Government of Canada, in working with our international partners, is to make sure that we're facilitating an appropriate regime change at the appropriate time, that makes sure that Syrians have their country back in a democratic, fair, and pluralistic society that respects basic human rights for all the people that want to live in Syria. That's what we all want in this House. That's what this government will be promoting.
Time for a short question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to congratulate and thank my honourable colleague, the member for Mississauga-Streetsville, for his important remarks. He has, and I know everyone in this House has heard about the allegations of the terrible potential use of chemical weapons, sarin gas, in Syria. The rebels say that the Assad regime used them. The Assad regime says the rebel forces used them. But there is credible evidence coming from other countries that such weapons have been used in Syria. Can he tell us what the government of Canada's response has been and how the government of Canada is trying to help in that regard?
The honourable member for Mississauga-Streetsville, a short answer, please.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I will be quick. If it is true that chemical weapons have been used by either side in any way, shape, and form, this would completely, obviously, change the dynamics. It would be completely unacceptable. There isn't a human being alive that would say that that action in any way, shape, or form is acceptable to do that against any other human being. I'm sure that our government will continue to play a very strong role in this and make sure that if that is indeed the case, swifter and stronger and better action is taken against the perpetrators.
Reprise du débat.